Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Beatrice Go, the Asia Pacific Japan Market Development Manager for Human Identification at Thermo Fisher Scientific. Last year, I was on stage welcoming you to HIDS 2019 Kobe. This year, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our first virtual 24 hours HIDS 2020, Partnership in Criminal Justice. This is our third session. We're excited to kick off with some real-life stories. Why is forensic DNA critical to criminal justice? Every minute that a crime remains unsolved, it's time for someone else to become a victim. Hear now from the people involved and learn about how they're working together to accelerate this process. Let me welcome Vanessa, Klaas, and Mark to take you through their stories.
Nearly 2 decades ago, armed with my file and my fury in the wake of my father's brutal murder, I gave up my career in commercial law to try to make my country a safer place. Unbeknownst to me at the time, this would involve a life journey into national and more recently global advocacy, which in turn has led me to meeting and visiting some of the most remarkable people and places in the world, today being no exception. My first virtual presentation with an audience much more diverse, widespread and global than ever before. Good morning, good day, and for some, good evening. My name is Vanessa Lynch, and I'm the founder of the DNA Project. And today I'm going to share with you my story, which some may refer to as one of a victim advocate, but I prefer to tell it as one of a crusader, a DNA crusader if you must. Victim advocate, crusader, civil society activist, call it what you will. Being an activist for civil society requires you to be passionate about the things that matter to you. And the issue that I'm passionate about is fighting crime with science, in particular DNA. And I'm pretty sure that most of you who have joined us today share this passion for DNA in some form or another. And whilst many of the challenges I have faced and continue to face in my own country may not be prevalent in your own, I'm also pretty sure that there are other issues. As we have seen from many of the hashtag movements recently, global issues matter everywhere and affect people differently. My own country, South Africa, affectionately known as the Rainbow Nation, lies on the tip of the continent of Africa. And whilst hailed as truly one of the most beautiful and diverse places in the world, it is also one of the ugliest. Gender-based violence, whilst on the decrease, is still rife, and we have earned the undesirable reputation of being the rape capital of the world. On average, 58 people are murdered daily, and we also have one of the highest reoffending rates. And it's not just South Africa that is affected by violent crime. Many countries across the world face similar problems. But these are problems we hear of in the news that don't affect us. This makes it easier for us to observe them and turn away. But when my father was murdered, I could no longer be just an observer. I could no longer turn away. And so began my first crusade in 2004, when my father's case was closed due to a lack of evidence, and I realized that my father's slayers had literally gotten away with murder. Members of the public cleaned up the crime scene before the crime scene investigators arrived. Police and forensic pathologists threw away valuable DNA evidence, which may have identified the perpetrators. And there was generally a lack of knowledge at the time as to the value of DNA evidence in proving accountability. Accepting my father's murderers would never be brought to book was one of the hardest things I have ever done. And in an effort to ensure that this did not happen to more families, I started the DNA Project, a non-profit organization set up to help combat violent crime in my country. Over the years, my organization, consisting of no more than 10 incredibly passionate crusaders, has changed national policy and succeeded in lobbying government to pass DNA-specific laws which now regulate the National DNA Database and mandate that DNA is collected from arrestees as well as convicted offenders. Since that time, we have seen violent offenders linked up to as many as 30 crimes from hits on the DNA database. We've embarked on a national crime scene awareness campaign and aided the development of forensic DNA degrees in both science and law. And these are just a few of the reasons why the DNA Project has been lauded as a pioneer in lobbying for forensic DNA advancements in South Africa. The second initiative, based on the successes of the first, is today a global movement to aid other countries in Africa develop and expand their DNA outreach programs to help resolve crime. This new non-profit, aptly named the DNA Project Africa, takes lessons learned in South Africa to other African leaders and stakeholders, as well as to victim advocates, to help identify more efficient and holistic approaches to use DNA profiling for crime scene investigation, as well as help progress DNA laws, DNA databases, skills and infrastructures within their own criminal justice systems. Today, I would like to share with you a little about these two programs, and in the context of the time we have together today, I have broken this down into what I call 6 lessons, which I believe translate into ways to use the power of victim advocacy to help build a DNA database. There may be many more ways to do that, but these are the ones that worked for me, and I hope by sharing them with you today that these lessons may inspire you to do the same. The first lesson is the most important factor influencing the potential effect of DNA in any criminal justice system, and that is to look at what your laws allow you to do with it. Without enabling DNA legislation, you cannot build a DNA database. DNA being used on a case-by-case basis simply does not harness this incredible power this technology has to offer. By passing laws which mandate the collection of as many DNA samples from as many different categories of people as legally possible in order to grow a national DNA database, you are not only able to identify criminals at a much earlier stage of their criminal career, but you save lives by preventing them from striking again. Looking globally, every administration which has used DNA profiling in conjunction with a DNA database has done so because the laws have allowed them to do so. If you don't have DNA laws in your country, it's time to start lobbying for them now. And if you do have laws, you need to ensure that they contribute to the growth of your database by including as many profiles as possible. Flattening the curve is not the aim of this critical objective. But laws alone do not affect change, and this brings me to my second lesson, crime scene awareness. You may have the best DNA laws in place, the smartest scientists working in the most advanced DNA labs. But if at ground level your crime scene investigators are unable to secure a crime scene in order to properly collect the DNA evidence, you will never get off the starting blocks. This is why one of our project's main aims was to raise awareness around the importance of crime scene preservation, and we achieved this under our DNA awareness campaign. We raised funds in order to provide free workshops to a variety of first-on crime scene responders, as well as the general public. Our trainers were highly skilled, our material was simple yet effective, and our reach was national. We then tackled skills and education. When the project was first started, there was no specific degree for forensic DNA analysis in either law or science at any university in South Africa. We worked together with government stakeholders and leading academics from around the country to develop postgraduate qualifications at honours and master's level in both science and law, which degrees are both available at several universities throughout South Africa. The fourth insight I wish to share with you is a reminder that in seeking to convict with DNA, one must never forget the power of DNA as exculpatory evidence to protect the innocent. In fact, the innocent need to be protected more than the guilty. DNA is proving to be one of the most valuable tools in helping to exonerate innocent people today. To this end, we lobbied to ensure that our DNA laws included a provision which allows applicants access to the crime scene sample information on file for exoneration purposes, without having to apply to court to reopen the case. We also worked closely with the Innocence Project of South Africa, as well as the Forensic Science Laboratory, where DNA evidence could be used to help with exoneration cases. Play the video here.
The DNA Project sets out to educate the public never to interfere with a crime scene. The message was clear: never disturb a crime scene.
The fifth lesson is what I like to call innovative interventions, to generate support and awareness around the value of DNA to fight crime. And the video you've just seen is exactly that. And to do this, you need to ensure that you have a good cross-section of society on your side. And what better platform than social media to do this? Social media has the immense power to bring together diverse and diametrically opposed points of view, which helps bring legitimacy to your campaign. We engage with victims, human rights activists, social influencers, policymakers, as well as a range of professionals to achieve this. We also managed to produce 3 hard-hitting, edgy TV adverts and secured over 6 million rands worth of free advertising on national television. And what we learned through this lesson is that crime is not discriminating. It affects everyone, no matter who you are. The devastation we felt as a family over the loss of my father had no social boundaries and cuts as deep whether you are a cultural icon, an ordinary citizen, a politician, or an activist. My final lesson is oversight. Every system requires balance, and an oversight body with representatives from both the public and private sector to monitor and regulate a DNA database strengthens political accountability. This holds promise for civil society that human rights concerns will be safeguarded, and it prevents political deviations from the founding principles of the DNA laws. But there will always be challenges, and we have suffered some crushing setbacks. The Forensic Science Laboratory have recently lost the funding promised to it on passing the laws, resulting in a shortage of necessary DNA consumables and sampling kits, which has caused a rapid decline in the growth of our database. Convicted offender sampling has also been stalled, whilst our police minister tries to push for a population database. But despite these and other challenges, the groundwork is in place, and the impact of the DNA database on crime resolution has been significant. When I first started my project in 2004, the Forensic Science Laboratory held about 35,000 profiles on an Excel spreadsheet. Since passing the law in 2015, this number has grown exponentially to well over 1 million profiles on the DNA database today, and with as many as 64,000 hits. 16 years ago, I took a giant leap of faith into the unknown world of forensic DNA, crime fighting and victim advocacy. And along the way, I've created social movements that have contributed to making my country safer and will continue to have an impact on crime beyond the borders of South Africa. So can the collective voice of victim advocates really make a big difference? Can civil society influence and shape national or even global policy? Yes, I believe it can. When I first started this crusade, my mother told me I was farting against thunder, and perhaps I was at first. But so strong was my conviction in the belief of DNA to reduce violent crime that I leaned into it head first. No matter what the challenges that face you in your society, and no matter how hard the fight to overcome them, I believe that all of us has within us the power to change the world. So if you want to change the society in which you live, or perhaps even the world, I urge you to campaign for whatever it is that matters most to you. Your community, our world, needs more DNA crusaders. And I share these lessons today in the hope that maybe some of you out there may be motivated to connect with each other and join forces so that we can fight crime together. Just as DNA is the blueprint of life, so civil society, you are the key to the blueprint for change. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for this digital invitation. My name is Klaas Vervloet. I'm a forensic investigator working at the National Crime Squad of the Netherlands, part of the Netherlands Police. Today I'd like to give you a short update why we use the rapid ID and the rapid hit in the Netherlands, rapid DNA. I should bring this presentation together with my colleague Stephanie Vervloet, but she's very busy now with the project, Rapid ID, so is not unable to join this meeting. For now, I will explain why we use the rapid DNA. This was not an easy way to start with it, because we had to take several steps to reach the goal and finally could use it in the field. But I think these steps were worthwhile, because I'm a forensic officer for a long time, and I'm sure rapid DNA will help us in cases and will be a powerful tool to tackle crime. For now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the forensics in the Netherlands. We have a national police force. Forensics are divided in the region, so every region has a forensic department, and they will do an investigation from a burglary, rape, till a murder case. So all the cases. There's one that operates nationwide, and that's the National Crime Squad or the National Police Agency. They have another task. Of course, they are operating together with all the regions, but the special task is fighting a national and international organized crime. The other part is combating terrorism, also on national and international level. I put some pictures in it, but most cases had to do with large-scale investigations on drugs, so smuggling of drugs, but also the production of drugs. And we have, to you, a lot of problem with the production of drugs in the Netherlands, even now with crystal meth. The other task is to help the divisions on police, water, traffic police, aviation police, and railroad police. Two pictures, for example, a kidnapping of a Dutch crew on international waters, but also a murder case. In all these investigations, it's necessary to identify persons very quickly, because then we can do an immediate arrest. And when you do an immediate arrest, you have more chance for evidence. You can see, for example, there is blood on his clothes, or there are particles of glass on his shoes, or maybe wounds on his hands. So when you have a quick identification and you can arrest somebody, the chance to find more evidence is very good, very great. And also the second part, a conviction. And when you have more evidence, it's easier to convict somebody. The other part is not immediate arrest, but to know if we have the right guy. Is this really the guy we are looking for? Maybe you have an idler, an international request from Italy. Somebody is from the Drangheta is coming to the Netherlands, and they ask to arrest him. But we have to be for sure it's the right guy. So sometimes you have to need a proactive investigation, maybe a room or a stash where he's living, and look if we can find his DNA. And yeah, then it's important to do a quick identification, and maybe he can bring us to other criminal contacts. So another strategy than arrest him immediately. So the idea with real-time identification was to combine the human observation with the scientific observation. And we had five possibilities: the fingerprints, DNA, digital aura, voice recognition, and face recognition. And we know fingerprints and DNA were the strongest one. So we were looking for possibilities to do an investigation and an identification within 2 or 3 hours. And this was possible. And I will focus now on DNA because that was the most important investigation for us in real-time identification. Just to look back, and I think until now, still in the Netherlands, we work on this way. We find samples on a crime scene, DNA, fingerprints, other samples. And then we are working, sometimes hours. It could be the whole day. And then we pack the samples, we certify the samples, we bring it to a van, and it will transport it to a laboratory, our forensics laboratory in a region. Then they will investigate it, unpack it, make a registration, and do a second investigation. Maybe they found blood, take a swab of blood, and then they bring it to our National Forensic Institute, where they only do the DNA investigations. They will start an investigation, but this will take a long time. When you do it very quickly, maybe one day, when you're lucky, but normally it will take days, weeks, and even months. And that's really true. So we had to speed up this process. And our idea was to, not only the idea, we're working now at the possibility to do an investigation at the crime scene. So we put a rapid hit, but also for fingerprints and everything else, we put the equipment in a van, and we could do the analyze now at a crime scene. So when you find maybe stabbing, find blood, take a sample, put it in your rapid hit, and you will see it. We sent it to a laboratory, to the database, and they compare it. This could be done in 2 hours. So when you're lucky, you know the right identity, maybe of the perpetrator or somebody else within 2 or 3 hours. And that was the idea. The van is designed for the ISO IEC 70025 norm, so it's the standard norms. That was not an easy project because the steps had to be taken, 3 important steps. In the Netherlands, it's only allowed to do DNA investigation by the accredited laboratories. In the first time, we would work on accreditation of the National Forensic Institute, but that was not possible with 2 companies, police and NFI. So the police started in 2018 their own accreditation. It took 1 year, but it was granted last year in 2019. The board said, okay, you have your DNA accreditation at the police now. The second step was the law, because that's not the same as the Board of Accreditation who gives you permission. So in the law, and we hope this will be ready this month, the Parliament has to decide on it, and the Parliament is split in the Netherlands, the first and the second Parliament, and the second Parliament and the fifth people are already to do the accreditation by the police already, and the investigation by the police already. In all cases, so in organized crime, in terrorist cases, and other high-impact cases. And we hope the second part of the Parliament will be okay this month, so we can officially start working now with DNA. And people who know me, I'm working already 8 years on this possibility, and I hope we can start really now in this year. The other thing we have to solve was the contra-expertise. So in the Netherlands, the suspect may ask for a contra-expertise, so we have to have a contra-expertise available. So we split the swab, we used a splittable swab, 1 part for the machine and 1 part for contra-expertise. And also in the text of the law is saying, you know, we can divide the swab. When your blood, you divide it, 1 part for the rapid hit and 1 part is available for contra-expertise. Just a picture of the accreditation, not the whole accreditation, just a part of putting the swab into the rapid hit and send the data to the NFI. And when they receive the data, the people, the experts and the NFI will look at the quality and compare the data. So you can have the data back in 3 hours. They are totally 3 hours, so for an investigation and data back. My colleague Stephanie is working at the Rapid ID. She is testing the Rapid ID. Is it working okay? Can we use blood samples, saliva samples, or other samples? What is the quality? Can we use the sponge? You need a kind of sponge, and can we use a part of it for contra-expertise? So it's looking to several possibilities, but also possibility to use it in the field. When this project is ready, we will send all the information to our head of the forensic, and he will decide if we are going on with this rapid DNA in the Netherlands. So thanks for your attention, and if you have any questions, I will hear them. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mark Smith, and I'm the DNA Database Supervisor and Rapid DNA Coordinator at the Arizona Department of Public Safety in Phoenix, Arizona. I would like to thank Thermo Fisher for the opportunity to present at the 6th Annual HIDS Conference. Now we will begin to look at forging lasting partnerships with law enforcement agencies in the state of Arizona through Rapid DNA. Does anyone recall the significance of October 6, 2000? It's very hard for me to see a hand raise or the faces of the audience while you scour your mind to recall this date through the format of this presentation. But the big reveal is the beginning of a franchise that was delivered to an audience of 17 million people this night on television. For 1 hour each week, this show captivated audiences as viewership rose and the franchise branched out into 4 separate TV shows. In the UK, they combined related episodes into TV movies. Later, TV distribution allowed the show to be available worldwide. By the time the finales were completed, about 800 episodes hit the airwaves. The show? CSI. Las Vegas, Miami, New York, and cyber. Each episode had key features that led to its continued success. It all started with a crime or a series of crimes. The CSIs arrived on scene in their Hummer and gathered evidence, typically in plain clothes. The evidence was returned to a state-of-the-art crime lab full of futuresque instrumentation that government labs typically didn't have or couldn't afford. By the end of the hour-long episode, they had analyzed all of the evidence gathered, solved the crime, and made arrests. The show created long-lasting effects for crime labs, investigators, and prosecutors as we tried to explain to juries of the obstacles we have in testing every piece of evidence while struggling with rising backlogs, increased caseloads, and the inability to purchase some of the cutting-edge instrumentation presented in the show. Here's a brief background about Arizona. Our state currently has a population of about 7.6 million people. The Department of Public Safety provides lab services to more than 200 agencies across 15 counties throughout our state. We also ranked 10th in violent crime according to the 2018 FBI Uniform Crime Reporting Program. So what is a lab to do facing increased DNA analysis requests and large backlogs? Our lab superintendent developed an operational vision of how our lab could help assist investigations and forge lasting partnerships with our user agencies through the use of Rapid DNA. If we could provide world-class customer service and utilize emerging technology, we could also meet part of our mission for the Technical Support Division at DPS. In June of 2013, our lab purchased Rapid DNA instruments, and a group of 3 people were tasked with validating the instrument to determine if it met certain requirements for use. Once it passed the validation, we created a training program and implemented a law enforcement DNA program. Through validation, we were able to determine that we could process single-source, high-quantity DNA samples. While this limited some of the case types and evidence we could use, we were still able to process homicide, aggravated assault, and property crimes. Each of the samples processed through our RAPID program are submitted to an accredited crime laboratory for confirmation. Furthermore, the operators cannot consume any of the evidence as a part of this program. In addition, we created a standalone database for the program so operators could search for possible candidates when a suspect standard was not available. I can't cover every detail of our program today, so we can go over that in a future talk. A lot of time was spent developing a training program and looking to see which agencies would be interested in being a part of our program. We offered it at no cost to the agencies that were interested, and several agencies were ready to sign up. In May of 2014, we conducted our first training class. We trained 10 operators during an extensive 40-hour class. After waiting and what seemed like forever, the first case came in July of 2014. I'd like to go over a quick recap of some of our 6 years of our program. We have trained over 80 operators from 18 agencies. If you remember from earlier, we service over 200 agencies through DPS, so that's why our program requires each operator to assist other agencies and process those cases so we can extend the impact of our program. Our operators have processed 531 cases and aided 175 investigations. The program has even ruled out investigative leads in some cases, which has allowed the subject to return to their life and not be the focus of a criminal investigation. The investigative leads generated equates to a 33% hit rate. I'd like to go through a few case examples to illustrate the variety of cases and the impact to our community. The first case began during a traffic stop in the middle of the night. The officer was verifying the information from the driver and 4 other occupants. During this time, one of the occupants shot the officer in the face. While backup was already on the way, the suspect car circled around a building to return more fire. The backup officer arrived on scene and additional gunfire was exchanged between the parties. The car was found abandoned early the next morning with several bullet holes. There was blood in the rear seat of the car where the suspect who had the gun had been sitting. Near the car was a bloody shirt with a hole through it. Items were tested with rapid DNA, and the DNA profile obtained hit to a person in our standalone database. They now knew who they were looking for and found him about a week later. A jury found him guilty on 7 charges, and he received a long sentence. The next case is a bank robbery from southern Arizona. The man you see in the slide walked into a Wells Fargo bank and made demands on a sheet of paper indicating he had a weapon. After having his demands met, he ran out of the bank but left the sunglasses you see behind. The sunglasses were tested and the profile hit to a person in our standalone database. Police were able to apprehend him and he was found guilty on felony robbery charges. The next case is a child molestation case out of the East Valley. A family friend was in town for Bike Week, which is a motorcycle convention that has concerts and rides where some of the proceeds go to local charities. The homeowners and their children went to bed for the night, and then the family friend was found wandering the hallway in the early morning. When asked what he was doing, he said he was looking for a towel for a shower. Later that morning, one of the kids told their mother that someone was in their room in the middle of the night. Another child revealed that he was in her room touching her. After an examination of the room, a sample was tested from the sheets, and the semen stain matched the profile from the family friend. He entered a plea deal and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. At the onset of the program, we didn't think we would be processing sexual assault cases due to mixtures. However, the type of stain produced a good single source profile, and we began including cases where just semen was recovered. The next case was partial remains located in a shed where blood was also found. Samples from the scene were brought in and tested. The profile developed from the blood stain was compared to a secondary standard from a missing person. In this case, rapid DNA aided in the identification of this man and also connected 2 agencies who worked together to solve the homicide. The final case is out of the West Valley. There had been several reports in the neighborhood of a peeping Tom looking in windows. While the occupants called police, the individual always eluded them. On one night, the behavior of this individual escalated and he broke in through a window while the female resident was taking a shower. He stood in the doorway and watched her shower. When she got out of the shower, there was a struggle between them, but the suspect fled out of the back door. After he was gone, she noticed that there was semen on her hand. The sample was collected and tested on the rapid DNA instrument. The DNA profile that was obtained hit to a person on our standalone database. The suspect was apprehended and lived a quarter of a mile from the victim. This program continues to provide world-class customer service and timely investigative information to assist in quicker apprehension of criminals. In addition, results generated from some cases has excluded individuals from the case and allowed them to return to their life in a much quicker timeline than afforded by traditional investigations. In turn, detectives can refocus their investigation to identify those involved in the crime. The operators we have trained to use this program, and the partnerships we have forged with each agency have been instrumental in the success of our rapid DNA program. We continue to explore the uses of rapid DNA as the technology develops. We haven't reached the finesse of CSI and solve a case in an hour-long TV episode with commercials, but we are getting closer. We're at a 2-hour miniseries that can provide critical information to aid in investigation. Thank you for your time today, and if you have any questions, you can contact me on the email address provided on this slide. Again, thank you, and enjoy the 6th Annual HIDS Conference.
Hi, I hope you all saw the impact and importance that DNA has in these real-life stories. We will now be taking a short 25-minute break to give you a chance to visit our exhibition booth, application, and poster halls. We will be starting the next session in 25 minutes. That is 10 a.m. Singapore time, 11 a.m. Korean Japan time, and 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard. See you then!